Biz Buzz, 2 till 3:30 every weekday on Marlow FM 97.5.
Good afternoon and welcome to Biz Buzz on Marlow FM, with you until 3:30. So, my name is Costa. I'm here with you at Malcolm Parr. I'll introduce Malcolm in just a moment. Now, if you're expecting the dulcet tones of our lyrical Celt, Dermot Fitzpatrick, I'm afraid Dermot's away this week. Dermot's on an amazing project over in Ireland called The Adventure, New Warrior Training Adventure. So it's about the Mankind Project in UK and Ireland. And we're going to hear more from Dermot, I'm sure, in a couple of weeks' time. Speaking of a journey, Malcolm, we're on a journey today.
Yes.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, with ending the journey in somewhere special, I'll tell you at the end of the programme. But in the meantime, we've got a bit of a journey. It's an uncertain journey. It's to Budget Day in 2 weeks' time, on July the 8th. And it's beyond. It's how the government would take our money and what can we do about it. It's going to be the worst budget, perhaps in my lifetime. And our guest speaker today is Suzanne Brown, well known to Radio Marlow, of course, twice Mayor of Marlow. I met her this morning walking down the towpath by the river. I was doing my morning jog, and I said, Suzanne, we need to talk about the next 5 years. And she said, I'm your woman. So she wasn't wearing one of her iconic hats, but she will be here to talk a little bit later on.
Okay, excellent. Speaking of the budget, clearly I'm going to be talking about, well, where's the Chancellor going to get the money from? Because we need a lot of money to pay for services, and we'll be looking at that. Now, what else have I got? Football, FIFA, bungs, bribes, and financial unfair play. Who else is involved in this sort of tax double dealing? Anyway, let's have a little bit of music. I've got one of my favourite tracks from Bruno Mars, which is Uptown Funk. That was Bruno Mars with Uptown Funk. Speaking of which, he began his journey as Peter Gene Hernandez on the 8th of October 1985 on the beautiful Hawaiian island in Honolulu. What a beautiful day it is, Malcolm. And speaking of journeys,
I would be very happy in Honolulu right now, but it's warm here in Marlow. And I'm looking really at 2 weeks' time after my little holiday in Devon. The Chancellor, on July the 8th, is expected to use his budget to set out details of where the axe will fall on benefits. And I know you're going to talk about this in a minute. But one thing that struck me before we move on that is that £1 in every £14, there's 1 in 14 the world spends on welfare, is spent by Britain. Britain's only 1% of the world's population, but accounts for 7% of all welfare spending on the planet, George Osborne told us last week. And the Chancellor insisted that the current benefit system is completely unsustainable and changes were needed to make it fairer to working people who pay tax to fund the welfare state. And David Cameron, I noticed, had promised an end to what he called the ridiculous merry-go-round of taxing low earners, then handing them back money in benefits. He argued the UK should be a lower tax, lower welfare society. And as you know, it comes amid a debate over plans for $12 billion in welfare cuts, the details of which have not been revealed as yet, but will be in 2 weeks' time. And I know that there's other areas, perhaps some child tax credits and other things. Tell me, where can we expect the money to come from?
That's a great question. It's clear that over the last few years, bashing banks has been the easy target, but it seems no longer. So who else might be in the Chancellor's target? Well, it's not going to be VAT, it's not going to be PAYE. And so what else? It's not going to be national insurance. Well, it looks as if that means you and I, yet again, you and I. Here are some of the things that Chancellor might do, apparently. I say apparently because he might be listening to this programme right now. So, tax avoiders, that's obviously a popular theme. Let's get these big businesses and other wealthy individuals, and we'll hear from one of them later on, making sure that they pay the right amount of tax, whatever that is. And what about you and I? Well, perhaps they're going to increase the fuel duty, because he didn't actually say that he wouldn't change the value of the fuel duty, just perhaps the rate. So a bit of sleight of hand there. And apparently, even Her Majesty might be under the spotlight. So
well, even in Scotland.
Her Majesty?
Yes, they've denied, the palace this morning denied any suggestion that the Scottish people would not be paying towards the royal budget, the royal purse, as they call it.
Okay, that's interesting to hear that. And it's interesting actually. That's a great debate that whoever the Chancellor becomes in Scotland will have to consider. Where are you going to swinge the axe, and where are you going to raise your tax revenues? So far, you've been subsidised by much of the UK. So the Queen was facing scrutiny from the Treasury after taxpayer funding of the monarchy rose by nearly a third. Now, the sovereign grant has risen from £31 million in 2012-13 to £40 million in the current financial year, a 29% increase in 3 years. So Buckingham Palace has been shielded from cuts affected other public services by finding a formula which guarantees the royal household 15% of the profits from the £10 billion worth Crown estate.
I know where they can do that, by the way.
Go on, tell me.
They're going to close. They've got to renew. They've got to spend about £15 billion repairing the palace. So why don't they move somewhere modest like Marlow?
Well, how about a bed and breakfast to the palace? A few rooms there. Sorry, I didn't mean that. That was tongue-in-cheek.
No, but we've got the castle, of course, not far from here.
Yeah. So, anyway, the good news this morning is the Telegraph is reporting the Queen will not face any cuts to the royal finances for at least another 2 years, despite the increase in income to £40 million. So campaigners had wanted the government to carry out an immediate review of the sovereign grant so the royal family could contribute to the government's austerity measures and be in the same boat as you and I. So, has that answered the question? Well, I think it's really a question of a case of wait and see. So, fuel duty, yes. A number of other duties may increase, absolutely. Corporation tax, well, I don't think corporation tax will increase through the front door, although EU legislation may force an increase in corporation tax through the back door. National insurance is going to stay the same, income tax the same, VAT, where's your money? Where's your money? Malcolm, where do you think which one do you think is likely to increase?
I don't know. At the moment, we're having quite a bit of good news by so-called deflation, which is not quite true because deflation is taken over 2 months, not 1 month. And we had deflation for just 1 month, so it's not quite true. But the last time we had this situation, and I tend to compare it, was when Lonnie Donovan, you remember that? No, you don't. No, I see you're looking a bit puzzled. Was in the top 10 and all sorts of strange things happening.
Tax, it's enough to do that to you.
So prices have been frozen and falling since February when inflation fell to zero. But some experts, including officials at the Bank of England, believe the UK could be in for some more short bouts of falling prices, with inflation expected to hover at closer to zero for some months ahead. This means more money in consumers' pockets, I'm told, but it also means more pain for savers as interest rates still look like a distant prospect. I mean, I think I earned 2 6 last year on my interest rates. Prolonged deflation can be hugely damaging as it puts people and businesses off spending in the hope of getting a better deal in the future. I think that's true. This is known as bad deflation. So the base rate has been kept at a historic low of 0.5% since 2009, when we last recovered from a recession. Where do we go from here?
That's a great question. I mean, really conflicting signals there. And one of the things that if you've got wage rate increasing at the same time as unemployment is decreasing, then you'd normally expect a further upward pressure on prices. And when you look at the interest rate being at historic lows, that's actually not good for the country for one specific reason. Most of our pension funds are predicated on having interest rates much higher than zero. So our pension funds are going to be in crisis very shortly if it carries on the way it is. So I think it's time for some holding back the years and trying to go back to the good days. Let's hear from Simply Red. Mick Hucknall and Simply Red, holding back the years. And of course we can't really hold back the years. We have to move forward, and the Chancellor is looking to move forward by trying to find a number of billions of pounds to help pay for services. We talked earlier on about where he's going to get this from, and it looks as if banks are not going to be hit anymore. So his chums in the city aren't going to be touched. You guys are okay out there. So who was going to be touched? Well, we did say that Her Majesty was also going to be safe. And I'm pleased with that personally, but that means that it's possibly going to be you and I, as usual, who are going to bear the brunt of the taxation. We talked about a number of taxes staying the same. We didn't really mention the fact that a few things have already been introduced. and the Chancellor is looking to increase taxation, or rather bring hobby taxation or hobby activities under the scope of taxation. So if you're selling on eBay or Amazon, watch out. Hectors could be out to get you. Hectors, of course, HMRC's cartoon caricature. And what about personal tax allowances? Will there be more smoke and mirrors on personal tax allowances? And where we think it's staying the same or increasing, but actually we've been diddled? And what about salary sacrifice schemes? How many of us are actually involved at salary sacrifice schemes, yet HMRC and the government look to maybe trying to pull back tax allowances on that? So you and I, especially my wife's a community midwife at Friendly Health, could get hit by a double whammy because she has to salary sacrifice to pay for parking. Would you believe it? So how are you being affected? Call the studio on 01628 488 975. Text the studio on 07900 975 975, or tweet me. Tweet at Wisdom da Costa, WISDOMDACOSTA. So, on this beautiful day, let's think about things locally. How about some local news? Malcolm, what have you got for us?
Well, it's easy to think about local news on a day like this. The river looks beautiful. We had a wonderful weekend last weekend with all those lady cyclists. I think they were ladies. I didn't particularly watch. The lady cyclists coming through on their international world tour. And it seemed like the whole of Marlow came out to see them off. And everyone was wearing the traditional yellow hat and so on. It's a wonderful sight. But a lot of people only see Marlow in passing. Well, they like to think it's in passing. They're trying to go down the A404 and they get stuck at Bisham, or they get stuck at Loudwater, which has not greatly improved since the exit to the M40 Oxford bound has come in. So the last week or two, there have been options displayed for people to look at to try and improve Bisham. And the options involve things like traffic light systems and so on in rush hour, out of rush hour, and so on. The discussions are open, and in fact until August, I believe, September the 12th. So if you've got any thoughts on what should be done there, apart from dynamiting the whole lot, then do get in contact with the scheme's webpage, which is www.high-ways.gov.uk/A404 Bisham. And your views will be taken into account. In the meantime, if you're stuck in that traffic, or are about to be stuck in that traffic, at least you've got us to listen to, and that's a pretty good thing to have. The other little bit of news I wanted for you is that the High Wycombe MP, Steve Baker, will share his thoughts about his role as an MP for a breakfast talk in Marlow next week. In fact, I think it's this week. Mr. Baker will address a men's breakfast organised by Churches Together in Marlow on June the 27th. However, the discussion is open for people of all faiths, or none, to attend. The event begins at 8:30 a.m. Remember, it's breakfast, and you'll miss the Bisham traffic this way too, in the assembly rooms at the top of Marlow High Street.
And how do people attend? Or
if you want to register, you can just turn up. But if you want to register an interest in attending, the phone number is 07752 161 165. So I understand you are a bit of a fiend in terms of transport, and there's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is something you think about when you're going past Bisham. Is that true?
Absolutely. I love the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that's a great segue into our next story, which we'll have after a piece of music. But here's the story. Is Buy-to-Let the new 42? And there we have it, New Order. And with, of course, the wonderful John Barnes. And that was for Italian 90. If you remember Italian 90, the Men's World Cup. And the women are playing football at the moment out in Canada in the Women's World Cup. So this is especially for you, ladies. Let's hope you actually come back with the silverware. So we were talking about tax. And we hinted at talking about is Buy-to-Let the new 42? Well, Buy-to-Let, it sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? And there's some great reasons why you should, if you have the capital, invest in a property. It could set you up as a pension. And when I say pension, I mean an income stream for a number of years. If, of course, you can get the amount of money you pay bigger than the costs that you've got coming in. also, as well as that profit, if you can get that stable, you've got a nice little pension and earner over a number of years. At the end of the time, when you're ready to pass that on, you can pass this asset on to your children or to your grandchildren. So you've got an inheritance tax planning system here as well. So what are the four horsemen, the four tax horsemen? Obviously, it's very tongue-in-cheek because we all pay tax and there's nothing more certain than tax. Well, stamp duty. So stamp duty is one of the first four. Then you've got income tax, capital gains tax, and inheritance tax. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes now, and no doubt Malcolm will chip in and explain some of the things that you have to be aware of in relation to those four taxes. So stamp duty, let's start with stamp duty. So stamp duty was reformed in December last year. So rather than being a flat percentage of the whole property price, you pay different rates for different bands of the purchase price in a similar way to income tax. So up to the first £125,000, you don't pay anything. But a penny above, I say a penny above £125,000, and you start to pay 2%.
Do we have any houses below 125,000?
Possibly some flats, maybe not in this area.
No.
And if your flat or your property value is above 250,000, then you pay an extra 5% on the value above the £250,000. And if you live in a luxury mansion and it's worth more than £1.5 million, you pay 12%. So what, you tell me? It's dead money. Well, yes, it is, and no, it isn't. Clearly, you have to pay it, and tax pays for services. But the good news is that the stamp duty you pay will add that to the value of the cost of the property, and then when you come to sell it, and this is where capital gains tax comes in, you can include that value of stamp duty on the value of the property. But I'm sure that any good accountant would give you that advice. So what about income tax? That's sort of the next tax. So you set up your property, and by the way, interest rates at the moment are at historic lows, so possibly worth logging in or locking into a good low interest rate. But remember, although interest rates are low at the moment, they could go up, and they will go up at some stage. And we don't want to go back to, but we probably will at some stage, go back to the 1990s where we had ridiculously high interest rates. And so the interest rates alone, the value of the interest which you can deduct from the rental income, actually results in a loss. So income tax, and I just hinted at, well, for a start, you've got your income coming in from your rental, and then you can deduct certain costs. And there are many costs that you can actually deduct, including the mortgage interest, agency fees, buildings and contents, insurance, utility bills, providing that you rather than your tenant pay those bills. And these can be deducted in arriving at a net amount or a profit. And that profit will be taxed at your highest income tax rate. So, but the good news is you can deduct those from your profits to arrive at a lower level of profit, so you get taxed on a lower amount. But the bad news is that costs incurred replacing furniture or freestanding white goods such as a fridge or freezer are no longer allowable for tax purposes. However, replacing a broken boiler or a part of a furniture such as a kitchen unit would be okay. So not necessarily very clear or consistent, but the rules are the rules. So you built your property, you got your mortgage on it, you're getting a nice rental income on that property, you deducted your costs, you're arriving at a figure for which you're going to be taxed on. Perhaps that property is split 50-50 between you and your partner, in which case you split the profits and each of you pays tax separately. So one might pay tax at a higher rate than another. Then we move on to selling your property. When you're ready to sell it, we discussed that you can deduct the cost of stamp duty and any other improvements to the property. So add them together and then deduct it from your sales proceeds. Then you can deduct your capital gains tax allowance, and obviously if this is being split 50-50 between you and your partner, then you can deduct, you both pay a lower amount of profits, or rather you pay tax on a lower amount of profit, which are then taxed at your highest tax rate, which could be 18% if you're still a basic rate player or payer, or 22% if you're a higher rate taxpayer.
I think I'm going to find an accountant.
You started to lose the will.
Can you recommend any?
Yes, I could. Come and talk to me after the show. And I mean, there's more information which we can put up on the website if you're interested. Please call in. And don't forget, there's an interesting term called flipping, where if you actually live in the property for a period of time, then you don't pay capital gains tax on that period in which you live in the property, plus a little band of leeway either side, about 18 months. So we've talked about capital gains tax. Let's move on to inheritance tax. So finally, you've got your property, you're ready to sell it. And when you die, any buy-to-let properties you own will be included in your estate. If the whole of your estate is worth more than £325,000 or £650,000 for married couples or civil partners, then inheritance tax is charged at 40% on everything above that. So it's worth considering taking out life insurance cover to protect you from the resulting inheritance tax bill, which will be paid by your nominated beneficiaries. So if you take this route, make sure that your life insurance policy is written in trust. And by the way, a trust is a legal arrangement which will ensure that any payment on death is outside your estate for inheritance tax purposes.
Too late, wisdom. My children have spent my money. So I'm penniless, and that's why I go running down the towpath in the morning and meeting good friends.
Wow.
So before
speaking of which, we are now being joined by
Suzanne. But before we do, and before we have a little bit of music to allow Suzanne to get a cup of tea, I just want to mention about business rates, because this is something that I'm going to throw at Suzanne in a moment. They're a big part of the demise in high street trading, and we tend to sort of labour on this in Biz Buzz. We've seen a number of shops close on the high street, and we've spoken to some owners about the desanitisation of our town's character. I've seen it happen in my previous town of Beaconsfield. As I controversially said at the time, I could ride a white horse down the high street on Sunday lunchtime, and no one would even notice I'm there, even if I was Lady Godiva. So where are we going? More than 80,000 shops could close in the next 2 years without a drastic overhaul of business rates. And ministers have promised to look at this 12 months ago, and nothing has come up yet. Changing shopping habits coupled with a growing tax burden means almost 2 out of 3 town centre shops could be shut by 2017, with a loss of a staggering 800,000 jobs. I mean, these figures are bandied about, and I take them with a little bit of caution, but to me, they're frightening. Even 20% of those figures is going to be frightening. The tax is estimated to bring in $28 billion to the Treasury this year, which is more than council tax. So I can't see great changes happening in the next year or two at this time when we're trying to draw back money. So high street rates, what we can do to help the high street and all these sort of issues. We're going to chat with Suzanne Brown shortly. Suzanne has just completed 2 years as mayor. She's attended almost 500 or 600 events. I'm sure she can tell me more exactly. She's raised tens of thousands of pounds for her chosen charities, literally tens of thousands. She's driven sheep across London Bridge after receiving the freedom of the city. I'd love to see that photograph. I'd love to see that. She's created a scheme to rid Marlow of social isolation, which really strikes a chord to me, having owned a couple of old people's homes. And she suddenly realised, although she may be standing for Parliament in 5 years' time, and she might deny that in a moment, she's neglected her property lettings business. So she's on the letting side, and she's concerned about rates. So how about a little bit of music to one of her choices? And we can then ask Suzanne what she thinks.
Great. I think what we need. I'm looking forward to jamming with Suzanne and you, Malcolm, in broadcast terms, of course, in just a moment. But until then, I'll leave you with Bob Marley. Bob Marley and the Wailers with Jamming. Malcolm, over to you.
Well, we've had a good programme in Biz Buzz. If you've just joined us, we've been talking about tax, what the budget is likely to mean to us, and where we go from here. It's a journey which starts, I suppose, on July the 8th in just 2 weeks' time with the budget, and we feel that welfare cuts and other cuts are going to be high on the agenda. But going for lighter things, we're very lucky again to have Suzanne with us. She's just finished 2 years as mayor, and she's now got to address business issues because business, as I seem to remember you saying on one particular occasion, I think you were holding a bucket at Marlow Bridge at the time. And I don't think it was sheep going over Tower Bridge, but I'm not sure. It wasn't Tower Bridge, London Bridge.
No, Nepal disaster, I'm sure, or something like that on Marlow Bridge.
But you said you must get back to business. But before we talk about that, what would you say is your highlight of these 2 remarkable years that you've had?
I think raising a lot of money for charity, because I think being mayor enables you to do that and have a higher profile. But highlights of the year were probably the swan-upping, being made a Freedom of the City of London, and then obviously the downs, of course, were the floods.
Of course.
Yeah.
Were you involved in getting government help with the floods? Or did they ask your advice on that?
Well, no, yes. I mean, it came into it, but the flood alleviation scheme planning was already there. It was just a matter of being able to get the funding. So we helped with the help of other councillors and different tiers of council to get the funding, which we have secured, which is great.
It's great, but why wasn't the scheme considered earlier?
Money again.
Money and complacency, perhaps.
Yes.
So remind me what your 3 charities are.
Well, I had 2 charities. I had Thames Valley Air Ambulance and Marlow Opportunity Playgroup, which is for special needs children.
And that's operating at the moment?
Well, no, the charity is, but when I finished mayor, the fundraising has stopped. But we did a meat raffle, which was quite an unusual thing in the Prince of Wales, and we're continuing to do that. And the residents and people in the Prince of Wales consider they want to do Thames Air Ambulance at the moment. So
I was there last night, and I saw the notice on the side there, and a bit of music. It was really good. Yeah. So this is all leading on really to, I suspect, on our journey. We have a journey today, but in 5 years' time you might be standing for somewhere important.
Oh well, we'll see. It's all rumours come to rumours that end up in facts sometimes, but we'll see. It's early days. Early days, that's all I'm going to say.
So in the meantime, apart from your very important work as a councillor in the district, will you be looking after Marlow? Any particular interests you think should be looked after?
Well, there's a number, but yes, I'm a Marlow town councillor, as I was when I was mayor, and now district. For me, it's protecting green belts, looking after our grass verges and making sure the town is tidy with all these budget cuts that are going on. That we're getting less and less cuts, so we're trying to make sure that it's done, and if it's not, can we look at getting more money out of Wickham as Marlow to take it on ourselves? Because I think a lot of people in the town would like us to do it for ourselves, but the problem is having the funding. So at the moment we're pushing to get more funding. They've given us one offer which wasn't good enough, so we've gone back, and we are talking to them, and they're being very positive at the moment. So,
well, that's fantastic news. I'd like to ask you about that and also about your business, but I think you've left 1 or 2 tracks you would like to hear today.
Yes, please.
Great. I think what we'll play now is 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but perhaps we're going to get 3 out of 3 in terms of your requests from the government. Let's hope so. Meatloaf with 2 out of 3 ain't bad at all. Right, earlier, I hope you're enjoying the show, by the way, with Malcolm and myself actually taking over for the week anyway. But nothing's really gone terribly wrong at the moment, but we've still got another half an hour to make it all go, what happened there? Where have the lights gone? Early on in the show, we were talking about how the interest rates being at historic lows actually is a problem for future pensioners, because if you haven't drawn your pension yet, that your pension fund is predicated on having high rates of return, and with interest at low rates, many of us could have a problem with our pension. So we also talked about the fact that with Vital-Let, it's a possible solution for a pension to provide yourself with both an income stream and some capital asset which you can sell on or pass on to your children. Suzanne, I understand, in the words of a certain insurance company, that you're a bit of a property magnate.
Yeah, with another hat on. I started going into property before I went into the lettings business when I was 30, which is quite a few years ago. I won't mention how many years ago. I saw that the pension pot was going to get smaller and smaller, because I believed then, and it's proven now, that we're all living a hell of a lot longer. Correct. And there will be more people going into the same pot. So I thought, well, in order to have more control, I thought the only way of doing that was to buy property. And I've always loved property anyway. And I started by buying them and doing them up. And then I thought, well, no, I'm going to keep them. And I've kept them since then, which is over 20 years. And they're very good investments. And yes, they're far better than the interest rates now, and even when they were good. Because, yes, they went down a bit for a while with the recession, but they've bounced back. I mean, the property prices at the moment are incredibly high in Marlow.
And how did you fare during the time of, I suppose, when interest rates were quite high? Obviously, at that point, there was always a risk that you're going to be making a loss and not actually getting any net income in that particular year.
Well, I'm very careful with the buy-to-let mortgages that I have. I make sure that I do fixed rates for a term, and then as soon as that term comes up, I renew it. I don't keep it with the same company normally, because you can always get a better deal if you switch. Sure. So I do that all the time. So it's every, depending on how long the fixed rate is, but every 2 to 3 years on each property. So
you actively manage your portfolio.
Oh yeah. With the help of a financial advisor who knows which mortgages, the best mortgages to get, and where.
IFAs are an interesting case, aren't they? Because with the recent legislation about 4 or 5 years ago, many of them only really want to deal with wealthy people. So anyway, I digress.
Well, then the advantage of buy-to-let is you don't have to be wealthy, because you can have a buy-to-let mortgage and another property without any confirmation of additional income. Because as long as the rent it used to be 30% higher than the mortgage you're taking out, then the rent pays for the mortgage and you're covered. So that's why it's a very attractive proposition for people wanting to get into it. Yes, at the moment you need far more capital outlay than you did when I started, because you could get 95% mortgages then. You can't do that anymore. So you need probably 25%. It used to be, maybe better now, to put down, which is a lot of money in Marlow.
And are you tempted to buy properties off plan, so a new build, or do you tend to find that they're overinflated, those prices?
I would buy off new builds, yes, definitely, if I could. They get snapped up very quickly. One of my properties is in the brewery site, and I wish I'd bought that off plan, because I would be in a better position now, but I did buy it only a year and a half later.
Okay, right. So for you, being a property magnate has been a positive experience?
Mostly.
Right.
So I've been renting my properties now for, over 20 years, and there has been one bad tenant. So, out of 20 years with the properties, that's not bad. Okay,
so that would tend to be an issue with specific tenants, which happen from time to time.
Yes, I mean, it was unfortunate, she lost her job and things went downhill from there.
Okay, all right. Malcolm?
Yeah, I just wondering what's happened to the latest bit of the news. I was hoping a little glimpse of the budget coming and some revelation.
10 seconds to go, Malcolm.
If I keep talking for another 7 seconds, we'll have the news.
Malcolm, you can possibly talk that long, could you?
I think you can.
Okay, we're going to go over to the Sky's news desk just now.
Welcome back to Biz Buzz. You're listening to 90 minutes of the latest news and highlights, and we have with us Suzanne, ex-mayor, who's been talking about her business, the impacts of local government, national government changes. I don't know whether you heard in the news, but I hear that the electrification of the Marlow donkey is being put back by 2 years. I think this is a great shame. A lot of people depend on that journey, particularly with the problems at Bisham and at the junction 4 of the M40. So I'm very sorry to hear that. We're talking, Suzanne. It's good to have a female voice on a business programme, and particularly it's more women go into business than men, perhaps, nowadays. They say that you can tell a woman's appearance by her voice. And there's a man who's got the best job in the world who lives in Austria, and he's a postgraduate, and he has to interview 200 ladies who have wonderful voices on the base is that if they have wonderful voices, they have wonderful figures. So he has to take measurements of figures and so on.
That's a tough job. A little bit sexist, but tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've applied, I've heard nothing, but they say it also plays to a man's voice. A man's dominant voice and the depth of his voice is very important in terms of survival and looking after the family and all those sort of issues. So we were talking a little bit earlier, Suzanne, about how your business has been affected by changes. How do you see that your journey in the next 5 years in terms of doing business in Marlow and at the same time trying to juggle the political events going on both in district level and in local level?
Well, the advantage of being self-employed, which I am, is that I can be flexible for meetings during the day and evening when it comes to town and district meetings, but when it comes to work as well. So with the lettings, if somebody wants an appointment in the evening or wants it at lunchtime or early in the morning, then I'm flexible. So obviously while I was mayor, things had to calm down a bit, and I stuck to just a few landlords that I looked after, and then obviously now I'm going to ramp that up. But also I'm moving into property development as well, so not just lettings, because as you can see, or maybe you don't necessarily know, but the verge is going towards more people renting for a very long time. So when I first started, it was 6 months, a year, possibly a bit longer. Now people are renting 3, 4, 5 years and want a contract in that way right up front. So there's a lot of long-term letting, so the turnover is less. So, you know, I'm looking at property development as well as letting.
Do you think that we're moving to a stage where an Englishman's home is not his castle?
Yeah, yes, I do. There are far more people renting now, and also they like the flexibility.
Sure.
So, you know, they may have started a job down here, but then they might get relocated, and then they don't have the hassle of selling up down here and moving up there. So yes, it gives them flexibility.
And of course, that's typically a very continental sort of approach, where it is absolutely common in France and other countries in Europe to rent.
Mm. Well, I mean, I wouldn't rent myself, but I love people that do, because I make a living out of it.
Absolutely.
Do you, as a landlady, think enough's been done to publicise the fact you can extend your lease, or at least your leaseholders can extend leases by getting a sort of marriage value, which is as you know, is a halfway house, if you like, value between the current value of a property, say with a short lease of say 40 years, or a long lease of say 120 years or more. Do you think that's being promoted enough, and are people aware of that?
What in
people having leaseholds and so on, like yourself, if you've got a number of properties?
Yes, leaseholds. A lot of people don't understand leaseholds well enough, and if you get to near 70 years left on your lease, a mortgage company won't touch you with a barge pole, because it's just, you know, red flags to a bull. So extending your lease to the maximum possible. I mean, you can extend to 99 or 999 for the same cost. So do it for the maximum time you can, because it costs you money, but it adds value to your property, because otherwise your property, as soon as it gets below that, will actually go down in value. Right.
I think it's time to hear one of your other choices of music. This one is, let me just find it. It is Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. Any particular reason for choosing this one, Suzanne? Does it bring back memories?
It's like Desert Island Discs.
I love fast cars.
Okay, that counts me out.
And I drive one.
Oh, right.
Come on, what do you drive? Tell us before we go to the music.
A Z3 BMW.
Z3,
yeah.
Excellent.
And because
so that was you I cut up early on, was it?
It's only 2.2 litre, but because it's got such a light body, it goes very quickly.
Awesome.
Right, let's see if we can find this music for you. And there we were listening to Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. And the cars were starting on the car park here at Longreach.
They're on the way out.
Yeah.
We're ready to head to the brewery.
A little bit later.
Can I just apologise on behalf of anybody who saw my tweet earlier on this week that we're going to have somebody from the Rebellion Brewery over and have some special offers. Sadly, Rebellion Brewery is going through some great changes. They've got some great projects lined up, and they're going to come and talk to us about it after they've sorted them all out. So apologies for that. But if you meet us down at, where should we decamp to after the show?
I think we should go and talk to these people in the Rebellion Brewery.
Rebellion Brewery. I will buy you a free pint if you say Biz Buzz to me in the next 40 minutes.
Biz Buzz, thank you, and welcome. You're listening to Biz Buzz, and on our last part of our show, we're talking with Suzanne Brown, very recently ex-mayor, and she has reminded me that we're in midsummer, and there's an awful lot going on, I beg your pardon, in Marlow.
Man, you're really with it there, aren't you? Street cred.
Going down.
Go Malcolm.
Okay. I do remember some years back going to the Bisham Gardens. There's about 12 gardens open to the public, and it's happening this weekend. And it's an event I shall remember for the rest of my life. People have spent so many days and hours and getting these gardens looking so perfect. Tell us a little bit about this event, Suzanne.
Oh, it's quite incredible. Both the time and effort, but also not the gardens are fantastic. But there's ploughmans, there's boat trips between the gardens, and on a lovely day, there's nothing better. I mean, it really is. And all the funds go to Bisham Church, and it's wonderfully organised by a very well-known Marlow lady. Or Bisham lady, I should say, Patricia Burstall, who we all know well, who recently got the British
Empire Medal, I believe.
Empire Medal, that's right.
Wow.
Yes. In the very, very recently. So well done, Patricia, you deserve it. And having done so much for Bisham.
And if you cross the bridge, it's a very important event. It's the Armed Forces Day, which perhaps has not been populated as much as it should have been recently. No.
Well, the other thing is there is a very big Armed Forces Day held in Aylesbury by Buckinghamshire County Council, and obviously the Armed Forces are given discounts to go to that event. So, but we don't want not to have an event in Marlow, so we are at the Causeway at 11:15 for a short service, and then we're in All Saints Church, followed by anybody that wants to join us back down to support the Legion and help the Armed Forces even further.
And we've just got time for one more event. I seem to have seen something about Mad Hatters in Cleveland, was it?
Yes, at 2:30 in the afternoon, there's going to be a Mad Hatters Tea Party at Cliveden Manor, which is the new care home up at the top of Marlow, just as you're going out of Marlow. And yes, fancy dress welcome, but you don't have to dress up. And all the proceeds are going to Thames Air Ambulance, so a very good cause.
And Suzanne, what are you dressing up as?
No, I'm not going to tell you. But I obviously will be wearing a hat.
Perfect.
This follows your work, doesn't it, Suzanne? One of the biggest problems you say we have in Marlow is social isolation, and it's a frightening thought that in a few years' time, 50% of the people who live in our fair town would be living by themselves. And everybody thinks that social isolation just affects the elderly, but it doesn't. It's single mothers who cannot get out of the house to see their colleagues. This is what you said recently. It's people who live on their own. And you've done a huge amount, and I think you're involved in Age Concern in a very big way in Marlow. How's that going?
Yes, I've been doing Age Concern for, 8-9 years now, but that's only touches the surface, really. But without the minibus, they wouldn't be able to come to our day centre, and they wouldn't have the company, and they wouldn't have a home-cooked meal. But as far as the rest of the town is concerned, yes, it's incredible. It's not just Marlow, it's all over. It's not a Marlow, just a Marlow
Absolutely,
thing.
there are young mothers everywhere.
Yeah, exactly, and people living on their own.
Yes, of course.
And as you quite rightly say, more and more people live on their own in houses and have relationships where they keep their houses and have relationships but still live on their own. They're not necessarily the lonely people, but there are lots of people out there. So we're trying to get people to get together in their streets, look out for each other, and not just say hello and pass them by, but have a chat and make sure everybody's okay.
And this is something that's being sponsored or facilitated by a council-led organisation?
No, it's not council-led at all. It was led by Churches Together, who basically did a survey of all councils and all organisations, groups in the town, to see, asking the question, what is actually hurting Marlow rather than all the fantastic things about Marlow. I mean, we live in a fantastic town, and it's just, just a little bit of care, and we can make it an even better place.
And is it related to the street associations?
It is.
Right.
It is. Yeah, so anyone can set up a street association. It's run by volunteers. If you want help, I mean, I'm just the first street association that actually happened, my street, not me personally. And then if anybody wants help, like we're going to St Peter Street to talk to them next week. And then the Claremont having a street party the following week. So it's all growing. It's great.
So who do people contact? Sorry.
Well, they can either contact myself or Peter Hopkinson.
So good old Peter.
Yes, so it's all on. Peter's the main lead, and I'm supporting him. So.
And where would that be? The contact.
Oh, on email or website. So I can give it to you afterwards.
Yeah, so contact Suzanne or myself on Twitter, and we'll pass you on to Peter and so forth. I remember the Golden Jubilee and the Diamond Jubilee. We organised a street party, and it was a wonderful occasion. We didn't have to close down the road, but people suddenly were talking to each other who never knew each other before, and it generated that sense of community where you felt you belonged and you weren't, as you say, alone.
Correct.
And you didn't have that sometimes that onset of depression which comes when you feel isolated and alone. So what else does how do you foster people actually becoming a stronger community?
Well, I mean, the street associations are good. I mean, the street parties, they're great. They're great to start it off, but then we used to do a street party every year, but it was once a year, and then we all went back in our houses, if you see what I mean. And yes, we said hello, but the street association has really made a difference, because I didn't realise until we formed the street association there was actually fear in our street.
I think fear is a strange thing. It sort of takes hold like a cancer or a parasite. It just seems to get deeper and deeper. It is a problem, fear, yes.
Yeah, and even just light fear, like you're passing somebody in the street and you want to talk to them, but you're frightened of talking to them because you think you're invading their time. Whereas once you get to know somebody, you just go, oh, hi, and you have a good old chat. You were going to do such and such, how did it go? And also, because we're holding regular events, we're doing things nearly weekly or fortnightly. So we've had walks planned, we've had coffee mornings, we've had lunches. A group of us are going to the Bisham Open Gardens on Sunday. So it's just, we're getting, so people don't feel they have to come to everything, but there's things available that they can join in with and not have to worry about not knowing anyone.
And of course, the good thing about that is that gradually, as people get to know each other more and more, if you have an issue, you know where to go to get an issue resolved, and it can be very, very simple.
Well, I mean, we had, shortly after we were formed, one of our neighbours was burgled. And we haven't had a burglary in our road for 56 years. So it was a hell of a shock for all of us, particularly the person involved. But we were round there like a honeypot, because we all knew and we all phoned each other and we were around there. Whereas before we may know each other, we didn't have our numbers or emails or anything. Now we know each other's numbers and we just ring each other up. And we've got several very elderly people that need help. Just getting a newspaper every day.
And to what extent does I'm quite politically involved back in Windsor, and these sorts of issues of connecting one people with another is very important. But to what extent does the council get involved in by saying, okay, street associations, you're the head of a street, or you're part of a group in a street. Here is a list of contacts. If you have an issue, call this number, and they'll be there instantly. So basically a checklist.
No, I would be very wary of having a big brother approach on this, because I think a lot of people think if the council or government said, look, go ahead and do street associations because you should do it, and
I think
pushing people. I think
I wasn't thinking more of making people do it, but rather saying, look, when you do it, you need to know if you have a pothole, this is the number to contact. If you have an issue with antisocial noise, if you have an issue with ducks crossing the road, because we have this, it's a big issue if you're near a main road.
No, that yes, we have websites and contact numbers for that.
Oh, the
That's
dreaded
different.
website.
The street associations is not a council-run thing, so we can point them in the right direction, and we would give Peter Hopkinson as the contact. And if they need any more help from us to do with potholes, then that's a different issue. That is a council query.
But it sounds like a great idea, a great venture, and it's doing well, I understand.
It is doing well, but as we're living longer and the demand on, for example, the doctor's surgery is becoming higher, and more people are going to the doctors when actually they don't necessarily have anything wrong with them, for a chat, because they haven't got anyone to talk to. Hopefully it will alleviate the doctors. Well, it's not going to alleviate
reduce
it
the
overnight,
pressure slightly.
But it'll relieve the pressure, and hopefully it will help them as well as the individuals.
So Peter Hopkinson and yourself are the people to contact.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Over to Malcolm.
Thank you so much for that. We're coming near the end of Biz Buzz today, and we brought you some of the latest news, the business news particularly, from myself and from Wisdom to Costa. And we've been very, very fortunate to have Suzanne Brown with us today, who's done so much for Marlow. And I've got the feeling a lot more is going to come, particularly with representing Marlow on the District Council and beyond. So,
and beyond, that's so intriguing. We can't wait to hear more, actually. Digging.
5 years is a very short time in politics. A long time when you're on the air, but a short time in politics. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
And of course, next week we'll have, in 2 weeks' time, we'll have Dermot back. I'm looking forward to hearing about his venture, his journey out in Ireland, helping men reach their potential.
I think it's a great mission he's on, and it's putting men, letting men recognise their role in life. A lot's been done for women, and a lot more can be done for women, but I think men, perhaps I'm bound to say this, have been neglected to some degree in terms of having confidence in themselves and knowing their position in society and community and all the other bits and pieces. So let's finish on that, and it's great when you're behind the controlling microphone because you can have the last word.
You can play whatever you want.
But this is your music. It's Unbreak My Heart.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
by
thank you.
Tony Braxton.
Thank you.